Hit it, Phil. Can it be the breeze that fills the trees with rare and magic perfume? Oh, no, it isn't the breeze. It's Jackson time. La, da, da, da.
Well, hello again. This is Buck Benny speaking. We are doing our second part of my interview with Kathy. This part is covering her Lost Benny books. And maybe you can hold those up for us so we can see them. She has two. She has the blue one that's the first volume and the green one that is the second volume.
Hopefully there will ultimately be like 10 or 11 volumes of these.
Exactly. That's what we're hoping for. And they'll be the colors of the rainbow. So I'm excited about that. Or the colors of Jello, I should probably say.
Yes. So.
But just wonderful books, and out there in Amazon or any place you can get books, they're all there. The green one has only been out for a couple months now, 3 months, maybe, I don't know, 2 months. Yeah. And delightful reads on for both of them. This interview that I created with her for the Jack Benny virtual convention that was held over Valentine's weekend was just a lot of fun to do, and we go in depth on what the highlights of both books. So it's really nice to hear the thing. I think it works out pretty well. And Kathy is just so much fun to interview because she's so enthusiastic, and so we just get so into the discussion. It's just a delight to listen to these things. I love them. And what else? Anyway, we'll point out some things as we go a little bit, but Kathy, anything you wanted to mention about the interview?
Well, again, I'm so incredibly grateful to you, Daryl, for doing these things. As I said, for me, truly, they're a labor of love for anybody who's a fan of Jack Benny. That's why I wanted to get these things out, because without them, you've lost, there's about 2.5 years of the Benny show, as many as 4, I guess, from May 1932 until the spring of 1936. And we have so few actual recordings at this point that it's easy to dismiss them and say, oh, we hadn't gotten the show together, or maybe they're not very good. Well, that's because they're all partial and many of the recordings are not very good. But I really gained additional, so much more respect for Jack and his first writer, Harry Kahn, to see how hard they worked on these, how they were developing characters, and the kind of proto-situation, workplace situation comedy through this. So I found them actually all pretty delightful to read, which was news to me.
I will agree with that. Because when I listen to the old, it's hard because you listen to the old episodes and there's skips, there's scratchy, there's part of the episode even completely missing a lot of the time. And so you kind of get this kind of biased look at it where you're like, oh, that wasn't very good, and this was just Jack starting out, and this is like a prototypical Jack, and he needs to get further along to be really refined. But having the scripts to read, and in your head as you're reading the scripts, of course, you can hear certainly Mary, when Mary comes on, you can hear her voice in your head. Certainly Jack throughout, you can always hear his voice in your head. And it actually makes for it's like you're listening to the shows. I have a feeling that as the years go on and I'm reading these more often and everything, that I'm going to have a real hard time remembering which things are actually exist in audio format and which ones don't, because I'll feel like I've listened to or experienced all of it, and I won't be able to tell which is which, because it's not like afterwards I'm going, oh yeah, I remember reading that. Afterwards, it's more like I remember hearing that, because my brain interprets it as hearing it, even though I'm reading it, just because I'm so used to the interactions and things. But a delightful set of books. And I personally, I love the first one, but I almost like the second one even better, just because they're continuing to grow in what they're doing, and you're seeing more things come out of it, like the film parodies, and there's a relationship between Jack and Mary that we'll get into in the interview that's delightful. Yeah. And we never knew about it. It's a brand new thing we found out about. And Zach, you have any, because you did the editing on this thing, anything you want to point out about it or anything?
Kind of as before, I'm recommending the uncut one for obvious reasons, but in particular with this discussion, I think it's important, especially for people my age, to understand where our comedy heritage comes from to a degree. And the discussion that you guys get into leads to comparisons to Seinfeld, which I think are an essential understanding point for people to gain a connective tissue to what they grew up with, and then these new things that they can be discovering. And what Kathy has done is unearthed the origin point of, as you said, Buck, that like the origin point of where a lot of our comedy tropes come from, but also there isn't the appreciation for Harry Conn, who, you know, for all the stories about Harry Conn throughout the years and whether or not Benny fans even like his writing, one thing's undeniable, that he builds a foundation that then Morrow and Boulogne can build off of from there. And to have access to the material, period, is quite a treat. And so listening to Kathy actually talking about acquiring these scripts and the labor that it took to get them, I think is just as fascinating as the scripts themselves, because it's an oft-told tale of preservation that, you know, something's neglected or an archive won't let it out or whatever the case may be. And those stories are just as important because it shows how difficult it is to acquire the material and why it's not as simple as just pulling it up online anymore. You have to actually dig.
Right.
Yeah.
I agree. And I think that's the interesting behind the scenes thing. It's almost like her last volume, after she does all the Lost Benny scripts, should be kind of a how it all happened, how she pulled it all together. I'd love to read a book on that. And
like, even like if it's a transcribed interview, like near the end of the book, where like somebody like you, Daryl, like sits down with her and just breaks it down from Journey's perspective alone.
Well,
Like
there
that.
you go. It'll be a little like Raiders of the Lost Ark. I'll have it.
Yes.
And I'll be going after the Ark of the Benny Covenant. Then
The scripts are being examined by top men.
yes,
Top
that's right.
men. You see it in Area 51.
Right next to the
top
aliens.
men?
Top men.
Men.
John, do you have anything to add about this?
I would recommend the book, definitely. And I'm looking forward to hearing the interview. I know that having already read a book, you've got so much background, Kathy, to be able to like say, take the scripts and then explain them a little bit. And I know you're always so relaxed because you know what you're talking about. You're not making it up.
Well, and I think it's nice for John and I that we do the Jack Benny podcast, that we experience all the episodes that we can, that are available for audio, but having this to kind of read through and for us to be able to reference it in our podcast when we're dealing with future episodes, you know, episodes that exist, but sometimes in our intros, if something comes up that ties back to this era, we can do that now, where before it was just sort of this hit and miss mess. And really, I listened to the episodes, I've even done intros to the episodes, but can I remember clearly what was going on in those scratchy, old, bad sounding episodes? No, usually not. Usually what I remember about them is that they sound scratchy and bad, and they
Exactly.
you know, and for a number of them, it's like, oh, we have the first 15 minutes, or we have the last 15 minutes. It's like,
or the only thing that you can hear is the inflection. So you're like, oh, they got a good performance, don't know what they're saying. Whereas this is like the opposite of that. You get the words, and then having heard the inflection, you can apply it onto it. Yeah,
exactly. And the only thing I'll say that's a little difficult with reading the books is that, like, you got Ethel Chute and some of the other people that you probably don't have locked in your memory how they sounded. A person could go back and listen to those early ones. I mean, if I was to give someone advice, I'd say listen to certainly the first Jack Benny episode, because it has all of these folks in it. And then you'll get in your head a little bit about how they sound. Maybe listen to the first few episodes that are available, and then go read the book, because then hopefully their voices will hop in there in your brain as well. On the other hand, often when I read it, before Mary's in it, I'll read Ethel's line and be thinking, and I'll hear Mary's voice doing the line, which is fine too. It makes it entertaining that way. And then for all the guy parts, in my brain, it's usually Frank Nelson or Mel Blanc that's doing the voice, because they did so many voices that I'll go, okay, I'm using their voice to fill this in my brain. But anyway, the other thing about the second volume is
much improved because of reader suggestions. So
yes. Well, why don't you go ahead and share what that piece is for the second volume that we've added that's new.
Well, Daryl had an absolutely fantastic idea. He said at the beginning of each script, why don't you provide a sort of a brief synopsis or a capsule of what's happening in the script to come and how it connects to the other scripts, so that you're not rolling into it blind but understand it better. And I took that comment to heart, and I think it makes a great improvement.
I think it does. And I think in later volumes too, as things come up that are an ongoing piece of the show or something that's going to last forever, you can talk a little bit about it in that blurb and how important that piece is that's introduced. And otherwise, you're just presenting the scripts and you're relying on the reader to read the whole thing.
Well, that's it. I do have introductions up front, but it's also nice to have it reinforced.
Yes.
Right when you go to read the thing.
I think so too.
Publishing. So
that's great. So anyway, I'll let you guys enjoy this interview, and we'll go from there. But please remember to pick up her books.
Amazon, you can sometimes get discounts through Bear Manor Media. The publisher Ben Omart has been so wonderful to believe in this series and to commit himself to it, because not gonna and nobody's gonna make $1 million on these. But I'm so grateful that he wants this resource available, wants us to see it all. So, but Amazon is just as good at any place to get a hold of these. So
yeah, and no one's going to make $1 million off of it, but they're worth $1 million. I'll tell you that. So
there you go.
They're worth $1 billion, Kathy.
At least $1 billion.
I know that because I had him appraised.
All right, well, enjoy, folks, and we'll see you next time. Thanks, everybody. Well, hello again. This is Buck Benny speaking. I am joined again by Kathy Fuller Seeley. We're going to finish our conversation about her books, and this is actually part 2 of our conversation, where we originally focused on her book, Jack Benny and the Golden Age of American Radio Comedy. This time, we're going to focus on her 2 more recent books, yay, which are Jack Benny's Lost Radio Broadcasts. She's got Volume 1 and Volume 2. And I just think these are just wonderful additions to the Jack Benny. Her original book, if you just want to read about Jack and read about the gang and read about the show, this is the place to go to read about all that. And that's fantastic. And those books are necessary. And there's really 5. There's the other 4 that I highly suggest in hers. If I would suggest them in order, let me just say really quickly, there'd be Jack's own book, Sunday Nights at 7 would be the number 1 book I would suggest. And then after that, the number 2 book I'd suggest would probably be Milt Josephberg, the Jack Benny Show, because it's got a chapter on Phil and a chapter on Rochester, and everybody gets their chapter, and it's just, if you want to read, if you're a fan of the show, that's a great one to read. And then honestly, if I was to suggest a third one, I would suggest this one is my 3rd Jack Benny book. It's in the top 3. Whoa, because it just gives you insights that's not in any of the other books. The rest of the books that are on Jack are wonderful. Fine's book is great. Mary Livingston's book is great. It's just, they a lot of times regurgitate the same sort of stories that maybe you've already read in Sunday Nights at 7. And I'd almost rather read them from Jack's point of view than from somebody else's point of view. But they're like, I read all of them. I mean, if you're into Jack, I would say read all 5 of those books. But what these books do that we're going to talk about today is something completely different, is it lets you experience some of Jack that you've never been able to experience. This book right here has the volume 1 has the script, the first 26 scripts. The first one being one that is his very first radio show. It's available in audio form where you can listen to Jack have his first episode. It's preserved. But all the rest of them, the other 25 scripts that are in here, are lost. And you can't, there's no way to listen to them. There's no way to see them. But here, you can experience them. And it includes Mary's very first appearance on Jack's radio show, a script that out of all the scripts, that all the lost ones, it's the one that I wanted to read the most. And it's charming to see how she's introduced and everything. And I'm so glad that she did exactly what I would do, because that's the last script in the book, I think. Am I correct with that?
Mhm.
Yeah. That I would have taken it right up and had that be the last one, even though if you're making the book, you really wanted to only be 25 long or 24 long, whatever, I'd go, no, we got to stretch it to there, because it's the first big introduction of a character that will stay forevermore with Jack. And I think that's great. And then her second volume that just came out about a month ago is volume 2, and it covers, and as you can see, volume 2 covers August 1st to October 26th, 1932, and it's again 20, 26, 25, I don't know, scripts.
It's 25 this time, because
25.
one is kind of lost,
kind of misplaced,
extra temporarily.
she's going to be adding that in which to one of her later volumes, which is fine. This is charming because what you're getting, you can see a little bit in the first volume, but even more in the second volume, of where you can see it start to morph in Jack's finding his way and what his character is going to be. And it's interesting because so many, like he'll have traits that are in other characters on the show, but then as those actors leave and things, he's like, I liked that piece, or I thought that was interesting to the audience. I'll integrate that into me, into my what I'm doing. It was either him doing that or Harry Kahn doing it, one of his writers. I don't know, but they would tend to grab things like, oh, we got a bunch of characters that are cheap. Well, cheap's funny, and let's bring that to Jack. And we have a character that's kind of vain. Oh, that's kind of funny. Let's bring that to Jack. And so Jack's his character adds to its richness as it goes, borrowing those pieces from other characters. Actually, it's so interesting. But so Kathy, I guess what made you think to do this? I mean, this is something that I think people have sort of kind of, if you're an ultra fan, you've kind of mentioned that you'd love to see these. It's too bad they don't exist or whatever. Certainly when we were able to have the tobacco scripts, which are the tobacco company that sponsored Jack's show, or sponsored any of the radio shows really, they had to, as part of the legal documents for getting sued and everything, they had to release everything they'd ever had in print, every document they ever had. So it meant all the scripts got released. So we had Jack's scripts from like 1942, 43, something like that, 44, whatever it was, up until the end of his show. And those are delightful to read, and I've enjoyed reading those. But you're always like, oh, I wish he'd been sponsored by tobacco from the very beginning, because then you would have had all those scripts too. But so it's like, oh, we're never going to be able to see these scripts. We can't hear them. And then Kathy comes up with doing this. So what's the genesis of it? How did you decide to do this?
Oh, well, bless you. It takes an army or a village to do these kind of projects. Ever since I was a little girl, you seem, Daryl, also to be one of these completists that when you get into something, gosh, you'd like to hear, read, or view all of them. From the time I was a little kid, and knowing that here are some Jack Benny episodes, why were only these certain ones available? Still, like nearly 700. But what about the early ones? I longed to know about it, but they said there weren't other copies out there. They were, it turned, I didn't know, I just thought they were simply gone. Yeah. And when I started working on this project, that's when I learned that there was a set of scripts in that Jack Benny had donated along with other papers.
When you started working on this book, that's when you discovered there was all the scripts. Is that?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes,
okay.
Yes. So that it was only finding out about the two archives and exploring them. That's where I was finally able to get my hands on the scripts, and they're in small bound volumes, and it felt so precious being able to hold them.
Of course. And then you had the piece of well, you can enjoy that, you can read through them, you can hold them in your hands. That doesn't help me. And I think that's an interesting story too, about the fact that you were supposed to theoretically only look at them, correct? And you couldn't even take pictures of them or anything, right? So there was no way to get
Exactly
that
not.
information out.
Right. I could take notes with a pencil on a piece of paper. I was incredibly grateful then and now to Laura Leibowitz, who in her first volume of her Forever 39 series, she had done the enormous work years ago of also going to the UCLA library and taking incredible, synopses and
Yes.
cast lists. But it is marvelous, and I couldn't have done the rest of my research without it.
Right.
But it's still, I longed to be able to liberate these scripts from the archive. And I went to go do it, and the archivist, the librarian, stopped me at the door, and I said, hi, I'm here to take pictures of the Benny scripts. And they said, no, you're not. And I said, but why? There's nothing on the website. Nowhere does it say I can't do that. And they they open a drawer and they pull out a piece of paper that they don't actually show me. So I don't know if they're making it up. And they go, no, you can't. This is the intellectual property of the Jack Benny estate. You can read it, but you cannot copy it. Unless you have, they said, unless you have a written signed letter signed in blue ink so that we know it's original from the Jack Benny estate. And I'm going, I've come all the way to California, and what do you mean I can't do this? Here again, Laura Leibowitz is, my incredible savior. I may have Facebooked her because I didn't have her phone number at this point. Because this was about 2012, 2014. Because it's taken me a while to be able to do this. And I said, Laura, can you help me out here? Because it turns out she is a representative of the estate and can do amazing things. So she got the letter sent, and I could go in there with my cell phone camera. And I had exactly 2 days to get something like 3,600 pages snapped. But so that's how I ended up losing forgetting to skipping over one script. But here I am, bing, 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 bing. They were not, they don't look good enough to just, to present on their own. They would need to be transcribed. Well, I did that about 2012, 2013, 2014. And I was using them to be able to write the chapters of this book. But this is where, again, it takes a village. A wonderful Ben Omart of Bear Manor Media Publishing. I saw he's an active Jack Benny fan and a marvelous guy who's done the Lord's work, if you will, in publishing so many wonderful entertainment-related books. His quality is super. His prices are reasonable. I just adore working with him. But he was going. We were chatting on the Jack Benny Facebook page, and he's going, gee, it'd be great sometime to have some of those early scripts published in book form. And I go, oi? And Ben, could we maybe do this? Because he even volunteered to hire the typist to help me transcribe them. So, so he's been absolutely wonderful to take this on, because it costs money to put a book together. And so that's how it hit right in COVID times. That's how we got the first volume out.
Perfect.
I'm incredibly grateful to Laura Leibowitz because she helped me with the lawyers of the Benny estate. The Benny estate gets half the royalties from this. There are no, as far as we can tell, no Harry Conn descendants, but so Jack gets because it's his stuff, it's his words, and it's his stuff, property, and so I'm very happy to share that wonderful material. So I said, process. Finally, I could put them out, and it's been marvelous to do the fine grain.
So when we're buying the books, some of the proceeds from the book is going to the Jack Benny estate. So already, just from your first 2 volumes, they've made millions and millions of dollars already from this, I'm sure.
Millions. The grandchildren are just going around in Teslas.
I'm sure they've been able to go see a movie or 2 based on the money that they've gotten from this.
It is truly a labor of love,
It is.
but it's something I'm so grateful that, as I said, both the publisher and the estate.
And
have
I'm grateful
been-
to be receiving
and-
it. Believe
and
me.
Laura
It's
too.
like, wow.
Yes. So that they've made it possible, and it's just been fabulous to be able to look script by script by script to see how Benny experimented. Because when he starts his first show on May 2nd, 1932, he's basically is like he was going out on the stage at a vaudeville theater. It's like, hi, I'm kind of the MC. I'm going to tell a couple jokes. This band will play like 6 numbers.
Mhm.
And as I said, what he didn't understand was that he could have been able to say those same jokes for a week, at the Palace or
Yes.
Lowe's Capitol or something like that. But here he's on twice a week, not just once, but twice a week on the radio, and he can't tell the same jokes.
Nope.
Because the audience just heard them. And he's going, it had kind of really never occurred to him that he would have to generate so much material. And
Correct.
he panics, bless his heart. And that's how Harry Kahn comes into the story. He'd been buying, because
And you can see why Jack, because
Ooh,
I
yes.
always kind of wondered why Jack would always talk so positive about Harry Kahn when Harry Kahn was giving him problems from almost the beginning. But
Yeah.
from Jack's point of view, Harry Kahn is doing something. He's creating my ability to be on a weekly thing that I couldn't. How would I do this any other way? I mean, I didn't even think I was going to be able to pull this off, but Harry's managed to do this. And nobody back then, who had writer, you don't know what everybody else is doing. So you're probably just thinking, I've got this special thing and I need to protect it. And then I'm sure after you got Beloin and Morrow in there to take over for Kahn, he's like, oh, wait a minute. This isn't as unique as I thought it was. He always treated his writers well, continued to, but I don't think it was quite as desperately holding on to his writer as he did with Harry Kahn. I think he would have let Harry go a little bit sooner, maybe, had he known it would be fairly easy to replace him.
Thank you, Daryl. It's such a fascinating story and insight into Jack's character. He's an incredibly loyal person. And although, Kahn was giving him some grief, he was very loyal to Harry and said, I'm gonna, Harry made himself indispensable. But what Harry would never exactly admit is that it took the two of them worked together all week to create each script. It was a hell of a lot of work to do that. And so I'm grateful that Jack eventually got more.
I truly believe that writers don't usually get all that much compared to the performer. But I do think in Harry's case, I believe what kind of ended it was he was wanting 50%, where they just split it down the middle. And Jack's like, there's no way you're not going to get 50%. But I bet if he asked for like 30%, which is more than any other writer had ever gotten, he probably would have gotten that and could have been on with Jack for years to come.
I've learned a lot talking to other people who work in the in the media industries today as screenwriters and writers. Life would have been, if you could feel a shred of sympathy for Harry Kahn, and he really does deserve some. No radio writer was getting any money. It was horrible. It was the depths of the Depression, and you were writing for pennies, and most people were acting for pennies, the sort of Mel Blancs of the world. If you weren't the star, you were getting a very little bit of money. But as much as Jack soon paid Harry more than any other writer on radio,
and he wanted more.
Well, it
Isn't that
turns
crazy?
out that if he'd been a movie screenwriter, he would have gotten a lot more. So radio was this particular thing. If he'd been a music writer, you get royalties on every time the song is recorded. Harry is not, Harry is creating half of what is Jack Benny. And today he'd be getting residuals. There would be a portion of, of the budget that would be going for writers and pay them, relatively speaking, much better. And they'd have many more rights through unions and screenwriters guilds and things like that. So they said,
have you
Harry
ever,
worked really
in
hard.
a dictionary, looked up killing the golden goose? It'll always have next to it a picture of Harry Kahn, which is interesting, I think.
But it didn't happen overnight, so they did have this relationship for about 3.5 years.
Yeah.
and they accomplished amazing things in 3.5 years. So as I said, to give Harry a little bit of credit, but indeed, and Jack again being sort of very loyal and never sort of saying in public anything that wasn't kind, but as it burned in Harry's craw to see Jack become this famous person, and that's. But on the other hand, today, didn't Larry David write a lot of Seinfeld?
Oh yeah,
But you sort of knew who Larry David was, but he wasn't any Jerry Seinfeld, but he, so
right.
There's always going to be a disparity between the big star and the writer, but indeed, so they were making it work in 1932. Is all.
Sure, and that's great that they did that, and it's great to see Jack and how loyal he was to his writers and everything. But let's get on to the script books for just a minute. How about if you share, because we know that the second book is green. The first book is blue. Yes. What's the deal with the colors? Blue. Why are we changing colors on the books as they go? Most series choose one color and stick with it. And I just thought the audience might want to hear what's going on with that.
Well, bless you. Ultimately, there could be 10 volumes of this. Ben Omar has been so generous and kind to say, he says, yes, I will support. We will get all the way through these. And as I said, if they were all the same color, how could you tell them apart? And I'm not the world's. I've got to get better about. I really hit it out of the ballpark with getting a good cover for the book here. Yes. And the wonderful production people at Bear Manor Media helped me use this illustration and came up with a nice cover for me. And I said, well, why not? If it's a series, I said, why not carry these over? But my goal is to get a rainbow. Of effect. So the next one will be some kind of yellow or orange, and then we'll go to red, then we'll go to purple, and then we'll cycle back through different colors. So
also it ties into the flavors of Jell-O somewhat. So many fans I think will be delighted to see that represented.
There we go. We'll be up to strawberry and raspberry by October 1934. Yes. So
so I'm excited about that. And then then what are the differences? I know you made some changes between the first volume and the second volume. So what are some of the things that you've changed or updated in the second volume?
I owe you big time, Daryl. As I said, in taking a village to create a book or a book series, it was your brilliant comment that just had not occurred to me before when you read volume 1 and you said, Kathy, how come you said I would sure appreciate when I get to each new show, I'd really appreciate a little synopsis of the show so that I know what's going to happen, because I've got plenty of stuff in the introduction. But as you said, when you're paging through script by script, and I just said, why didn't I think of that before? So
because in there you can say Mary's in this one, and this is the first time he does a spoof on a movie, or this is the first time it's this thing. Exactly, beautiful. And so she's included that, and I think to me, when I'm going through it, it's the first thing I look at. Is I look at that and see, oh, this is a script I'm going to be interested in, or oh, I'm going to look for this because she mentions that, and it's just nice to get a little preview. And if you don't want that, if you're like, oh, that's a spoiler, well, skip that page or look at it afterwards or whatever. But I just figured some of us looking at it would like that, and it gives a chance, like I say, to tout those things. Now, as a Benny fan, we'd love to see when's the first this and the first that and the first appearance of this person. And so anytime you can point that out, that's helpful to fans.
I'm incredibly grateful. It was a genius idea, and it will be incorporated into the next one. So, well, now I've got a question for you. Volume 3, which will sometime soon be in the works, is the one time in the third of the trilogy of the set of Canada Dry scripts. Canada Dry demands to move the show to the rival network CBS. See, this says NBC, because they NW Air, their advertising agency, told the sponsor that we can get more stations and a wider network and maybe a better broadcasting time if we switch networks. So I'm thinking,
Kind
do
of
I
like
just use the same
Verizon versus
illustration?
T-Mobile, how it goes back and forth, who's got the better coverage, and you switch your phone
Exactly.
plans.
So should I scratch this out and put CBS on top of it? Shall I paste in as CBS? Because it will be the only time, the only weeks he's with CBS until 1949, when he moves over there for the next. So I've got the
Personally,
question, what do I do?
I might, if I was doing it, I don't know how much it costs to get these pictures or whatever, but I might just pick one with him with a CBS mic that's a different picture, just for that one
there you
volume,
go.
and have that one volume have CBS on there, and have that be like an insider joke. Did you notice that there's a change, and it's because he moved to CBS and now he's moving back, and then from there on you can switch back to the NBC. Yeah.
There you go. There you go. That's fabulous. So I got to do something.
If
for
you
the
can find a good
insiders
one,
to
you know,
know.
with him with a CBS mic, that might be a rarity that's even hard to find.
And this is the problem. There's very few. I know the publisher was willing to put more illustrations in the book. I just don't have them, or ones that are good enough quality that would show up on the printed page. We can get away with amazing things here on the internet that when you go to print it, it's like, oh no, that's horrible. Yeah. So that's, I didn't want to
see that. Yeah.
Yeah. So
I mean, the only thing I might include was like, if there's a new character that it's for the first time to include that character's appearing, putting a picture of that actor or whatever might be nice.
Sure.
Because I'm looking at the back. Yeah, the backs are the same too, right? Yeah, so you use the same picture on the back from both volumes. So yeah.
Oops. Well, as I said, I didn't have very many more pictures, but I'll have to change it for volume 3 because it's got a new band leader and a new singer.
Oh, okay.
So oops.
Yeah.
Good old sponsors mucking up your plans for over 80
and
years.
the thing is, for your volumes, there's not, I'm trying to think of who's in a missing script when they first appear. I mean, like Schlepperman's first appearance is available in on the audio. You can listen to it, and almost everybody's first appearance, the only person really that their first appearance was missing was Mary's. That I can think of.
And indeed, that script was even missing from Jack's collection. That took another wonderful cooperation within the radio fan industry. It's not there at UCLA. And my guess is that Jack and Mary were very sentimental about it. And they had been asked by reporters and journalists over the years to see it. And it disappeared. And I thought, we'll never have it, because they're not even in Laura's collection. There are about 3 of these earliest scripts that are not at UCLA.
Right.
And Laura says there is no script. By a miracle, it turns out there is this very odd collection at the Library of Congress called the NBC Master Scripts. Someone at some point had every script and every commercial of every show every day on both NBC Red and NBC Blue in the early 30s.
Wow.
And it got microfilmed on narrow 16mm microfilm going up one side of the to save money. Somebody was being a real Jack Benny pinch penny. The microfilm, the pages go up one side of the small microfilm and down the other. And so if I had to figure out what day of the week, what was the date of the show being broadcast, I think for Mary it was July 27th, 1932. And I had to page through that microfilm, what was on at 5, what was on at 6, what was on at 7, what was on at 8. And there it was.
Wow.
So I was
How exciting that would have been.
So it was, you know, you're supposed to be quiet at the Library of Congress.
Yeah,
and
you're dancing on the chairs. Yeah. Now, so all the missing scripts, then you're going to be able to. You said there was like 3 that were missing. So you're going to be able to find.
We found them at the Library of Congress, and they're pretty much all in here.
Oh, so this volume had Mary's the missing script, right?
Yes.
And this one has the other 2 missing scripts are in here. Oh,
yes.
Okay.
As I said, the one that's missing from the second volume is a COVID related thing. When I was taking the 3600 picture, I accidentally overlooked one episode. And now with COVID, I can't get back to the UCLA library. I will. And when I do, I'll stick it into volume 3 or volume 4.
Or whatever.
I'm hoping for volume 3.
As long as we have it somewhere, that's the trick, really.
So luckily it ends up not being a major one, but of course we want to see them all. So you'll really like, so as I said, if highlights really quickly of the first volume, why you know, the amazing things you learn, as I see, is to see Jack. You can almost read his nervousness from the page about, oh, what am I going to do? I've used up in the first 3 shows every vaudeville monologue I ever had. What am I going to do? You sense a calmness or, you know, a little bit of relief when Harry comes in. You see in these, and he was on twice a week. Like,
so when does Harry come in? Is it volume? I mean, is it
about the
fourth
script? About 4th script. It's not exactly marked, but it's about the 4th script in the first volume. And what you see, as I said, there's 2 shows a week with 5 or 6 songs. So the first show scripts are very short, and they tend to have Jack doing more monologues because that's what he'd done in vaudeville all these years. What they start experimenting with is talking to each other. In the presentness around the mic, Jack's character brings over the announcer, brings over the band leader, brings over the singer, and they start to chat informally, although it's scripted. They start to say things to each other. So instead of just giving a monologue, he's interacting with the characters on the stage, and it's kind of like,
because he would make, like, if you listen to the first episode, he does make comments to each of kind of like he's not really talking, he's talking at them and not to them. But you can see the beginnings of that, where you could take that. And I'm sure Khan looked at that and was like, I kind of like that. And as a writer, I would go, it's way easier to write, how's it going? Oh, it's going great. I did this thing over the weekend. Oh, what did you do? And blah, blah, blah. And that takes up time. And otherwise, if it's just Jack, you go, okay, this is a bit then, and I have to I have to make it funny, and I have to, and it becomes more work to make one guy funny than if he's just there's just a conversation going on.
Exactly. So it also helps with another huge problem, which was comedians ripping each other off.
Right.
And every time Jack published something, you know, I mean, gave something, somebody else was taking notes, and on their other show, whole routines were just being stolen. And this is years before Milton Berle, bada bing, came online. So you're right. In discussion, you can build the jokes out of things where you're joking at in puns. Whereas, you know, 3 ducks walk into a bar, bum, 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 bum. Those other comedians were doing those kind of, I'm going to tell a joke, I'm going to tell another joke, I'm going to tell a joke, I'm going to tell. So Jack could be different by having sort of discussing and chatting and things like that, and having the humor. So that means it really helps if you start to build characters. That Ethel Schutte, excuse me, the singer was this, she was both George Olson's wife, but she's a sophisticated Broadway singer. George Olson is played, just as you had mentioned, he's the one who's kind of, Jack calls him cheap all the time. The boys in the band are you know, so it helps tremendously and makes their show kind of stand out. But again, it's still the work having to write all this stuff. But it then rewards the listeners for, you know, come on in, let's listen to it all the time. Oh, I remember these characters. And so let's follow it along. So it's so interesting to see kind of narratively.
And how that stays with Jack from then on. I mean, all his subsequent writers grab onto that, and even, you know, and if anything, they sink more and more into that. The relationship.
Another thing that comes up pretty quickly by the end of May that's really interesting is they get brave enough to pretend they're going away from the mic and they're going on an adventure. Now, they're not the first to do this, but it's so interesting to see them because they're so nervous. Jack literally says, we're going to pretend we're going down to the, you know, hi folks, after they did a skit where they supposedly go down to a soda fountain and drink some Canada Dry. And when Jack's done with it, he says, hi folks, I hope you understood. We pretended to do this. And the soda fountain counter was actually the bass drum. So again, extra interest to me is to see them sort of experiment and be kind of nervous and get their courage up to do.
The other thing you mentioned before to me in this volume, the second volume, has the first movie
parody
pun takeoff or whatever it is. So one, what movie is it, to how far is it? Is it towards the end of this or the beginning of it? And do they
Oh,
do
yes.
more than one,
So-
or is it just that one for this volume?
Oh, that is so great. And radio folks in the industry later would say Jack Benny was one of the very first to do a movie parody on his radio show. So it was notable at the time, and other critics remembered it after the years. They picked, this was in early October, 1926 or mid-October, a brand new film out from MGM,
Right.
which was the studio he was working for. So again, I'll scratch your back, you scratch mine.
So it's one of the last scripts in the book.
Yes, yes,
right?
yes. I think yes.
Yeah, because it goes up to October 26, 1932.
Right.
is
So
last
it's
one,
like the next to last show.
Wow.
As a parody of the new release Grand Hotel. Grand Hotel was the big blockbuster of MGM that fall. It was one of the first films to have like 5 or 6 major stars. Garbo is in it, John Barrymore, Lionel Barrymore, Lewis Stone, Joan Crawford. You know, they threw everybody in the kitchen sink in this
Right.
amazing film. But what is so curious, Jack would do this very differently if he did this movie in 1950 than in 1932. He takes the romantic lead. He has sophisticated Ethel Chute play Garbo, the ballerina. And here is Jack plays the character of the suave baron who's actually broke and needs to break into the ballerina's stateroom, into her hotel room, and steal her valuable pearls. And in the movie, that happens. John Barrymore comes into where Greta Garbo's inglorious, leave me alone, I want to be alone. And he makes love to her, and they fall in love, and he doesn't steal the pearls.
That's
Jack
wonderful.
plays that part of the lover, and it's like, you know, he would never do that in years afterwards, but
Right.
it was more of his Broadway Romeo character. The thing that stuck, that everybody loved, critics at the time and folks afterward, was they had another character, and maybe I don't know who played Kringeline, it doesn't matter. Lionel Barrymore had this crazy character in the movie where he plays an accountant who had worked for evil Wallace Berry. Wallace Berry plays the evil manufacturer who is a corrupt. And Lionel Barrymore plays an old man who's worked for Wallace Berry forever. And now he's got cancer or some kind of terrible disease. And he knows he's only got like a couple weeks to live. But he's discovered ways in which Wallace Berry had like stolen money from the company, and the old man steals it back. And so he says, I've only got 3 minutes to live, but I'm gonna live it up. And he ends up in the movie, he and Joan Crawford, who plays the secretary / prostitute, they're gonna go to Paris and live high for the last 3 weeks of Kringeline's life on his acquired money. But the comic character they turn it into that will continue into the Chevrolet show is a Kringeline going, bursting into scenes going, I've only got 3 minutes to live. And I wish, again, we had it as a recording. We can have some fun trying to recreate the show.
Oh, sure.
But as I said, I've only got 3 minutes to live. In the depths of the Depression, it just seemed absurd enough. Making fun of the movie, making fun of what's going on.
Talk about fun. The other thing that stands out in this volume that you could tell us about is that is Jack and Mary's relationship has a major change in it. And tell us about that.
Well, speaking of experimentation, in September, after they introduced Mary, and then she responds by letter a couple times, and she comes on the show. They're not quite sure what to do with the Mary character. She's about 18. She's a bit of a flibberty gibbet. She makes small jokes at Jack's expense. He cannot sort of control her, but she's a kind of minor force. But they flirt, and then she flirts just as much with all the different boys in the band.
Right.
And what Harry Conn and Jack decided to do as they go through the summer and into August is they actually head the narrative toward the two actually being in love. And Jack will, he'll get sad and upset when she goes home with another boy, and then she'll flirt with him a whole lot. And they actually comes together into a script where they profess their love for one another. Oh, Jack, I love you. Oh, Mary, I love you. And
do they ever talk about them dating or going anywhere together? Like after the show, we're
well,
gonna.
yeah, no, he's trying to take her home after the show, but and so it's always this, no, not this time. No, not that, but they come together and, oh, we love you, I love you, kiss. But they've written themselves into a cul-de-sac. I believe that Jack and Harry Conn go, what have we done? Where it's kind of like famously how they ruined the show Moonlighting by having Bruce Willis and
Right.
Sybil Shepherd go from that contentious relationship to falling into bed together.
Yeah.
Jack and Harry said, "Uh-oh, this won't be funny if we're in love."
Right.
That's and so within the next show, they go back to, she goes back to flirting with the boys in the band, and he goes being not even so much an unrequited lover as in sort of a downbeat, I know I can't control Mary, and I kind of really like her,
Right.
but it's not, he's not lovelorn. And that was just a fascinating thing to,
Oh,
because,
yeah.
to just discover when
Right.
you're reading the scripts,
And
because
it's not
nobody
just
ever,
one script, isn't it? Like
it
it builds
happens
over like
a
3 or 4.
series.
It's like a little mini
Yeah. Yeah.
arc, character arc
Yeah,
thing or something.
a very special episode of
Yeah. No, and then what struck me was, and I mentioned to you before, I don't know if I mentioned on air, maybe I have, but the fact that Seinfeld, who's always compared to Jack's show so often, did the exact same thing. It was where in the very first season, I don't know, halfway through the season or something, they decided to have an episode where they actually consummated their dating each other and actually had a sexual relationship for that one episode. And it was fun to play on how much it would freak out the other, his other friends and things, right? Your Costanza and everybody. And, but then they, in the same way, decided, okay, we need to jettison that. And what I think both shows gained by doing that, I think it's the smartest thing you can do. And I'm surprised other shows haven't picked up on it, because if you have characters that and I think it's brilliant to establish them as separate to begin with, then have them have a relationship, have that be quickly jettisoned, but then they can refer to each other in a more intimate way from there on out, not be boyfriend and girlfriend, but have this history with each other that goes through. And that's what Mary and Jack, people are they dating on the show? I mean, are they supposed to be, are they not? Is she his girlfriend? Is she not his girlfriend? And it was simply, essentially, she's his ex-girlfriend is what it really is. And they never say that, but now we know that that's how it plays out in the script, which I think is probably the most nuanced thing that comes out of these volumes. And you can see it and you go, oh, it just changes a little bit the way you look at all the future plays, things that they do. And you're like, yeah, it's like ex-lovers that can joke each other in a deeper way and say more vicious things to each other, and it just works better. And that's why Elaine and Jerry always have this deeper relationship than she does with Elaine and Costanza or Elaine and any of the other characters. It's because they have this history. And even though it was only one episode of history that way, like in that case, or 3 scripts in this case, it works. And I just think that's brilliant. The other thing that it would be interesting, I mean, I can't believe that Seinfeld knows this. I think they just happen to do the same thing, though he does have cufflinks that say Jack and Benny on them, and he's a big Benny fan.
Well, I would say no, but I mean, I was just delighted to discover this, but I think it got buried in Benny history, and
I think so too.
really
I don't think anybody knew this until you put this volume out, because I've never heard it referred to, never heard it mentioned by Jack or Mary or anybody, and I just think that was simply a lost thing that they jettisoned and moved away from, and it just never referred back to or thought about it again. But it does give a richness as a fan. It gives me a new richness to their characters that I didn't have.
Sure, but even though this has been buried, it is fascinating to me that longtime fans of the show can remember back things from 15, 20 years earlier. And that sometimes the show will even refer to them, like the one time when Kenny Baker, 15 years after leaving the show, is discovered in a closet in Jack's house or something like that. You know, I mean, so I love the fact that both the script rewarded longtime fans who remember, but also when I talk to longtime fans, and sometimes old, you know, fans. I had a dear friend who was in his 80s, and he could remember almost line for line shows that he heard on radio in the 50s and would never have gotten to hear again. You know, the ability of some people
so
to have
memorable.
This stuff memory. So it's really
well. It's so funny because so often they're talking to somebody like, you know, I saw Betty White receiving the Jack Benny Award, and we got a audio. I mean, a video of it, but it's very shaky video, but the audio is pretty solid on the thing. But when she does it, she talks about, of course, the Jack getting robbed in Your Money or Your Life, and all the big moments that everybody knows about. And who knows, somebody could have reminded her of those things, or maybe she did know those things. But I mean, if you're going to go accept the Jack Benny Award, it's nice to say some things about Jack, which she did, and that was wonderful. But you just don't know in the subconscious of the culture at large, even the people in the industry, how deep does their knowledge go? Probably not too deep. I think and then there's people like you and I who can get all the subtle, when they referring something 15 years later that happened 15 years before, we'll know what they're talking about. But there's a lot of fans who won't, who've listened to, you know, they can listen to 3 years of the Jack Benny show, and that's, you know, like 100 episodes or something, and still not get that. You really have to listen to 700 episodes before you truly connect everything.
Understood.
So, but these
hooray,
are just
hooray, Ultra fans. So,
yes.
Well, thank you. And the discoveries will continue into the volume 3, the triptych that is the Canada Dry period, because what's going to happen, as I said, right at the end of volume 2, what's happening right off stage is Canada Dry and their sponsor NW Air pulling the rug out from under it. They because the last script here, they're saying goodbye to Ethel and George and the boys in the band, and they give Mary her biggest part yet, where she gets to play Bertha the sewing machine girl who has to save the farm by running off to the city, and who knows what she's got to do in the city to earn the money.
Right.
So, you know,
and they revisit that later, the Bertha sewing machine thing, right?
Oh, yeah, they'll do it all. It becomes the kind of a parody of the old-fashioned melodramas that would have played in Waukegan when Jack was a boy, that people remember from late in the 19th century. But as I said, the Jack and Mary and Harry Conn are going to have the rug pulled out from under them, because all of a sudden Canada Dry and the sponsor and the ad agency say, we're going to move you to a different network. We're moving you to a different time. So God forbid any of your old listeners find you. We hate your comedy. And so we're hiring 2 new comedian writers, and we're going to have one of them be a new performer on the show. And we're going to force you to have a new narrative. Your show is now going to be about a Broadway producer who has a very smart aleck kind of underling, a character who would eventually be a kind of combination Mary and Rochester. But as they said, and a new band, you know, I mean, so and everybody's going, but not only do they go, here is a really interesting case. Jack, Mary, and Harry are going to go on the warpath, and they go to NBC. They go back to NBC and say, we want to find us a new sponsor. This is outrageous. They first go to the sponsor and ad agency and say, no, we refuse. We'll quit tomorrow. We refuse. And the sponsor gives in, but has something else up their, their sleeve for, okay, we'll let you go back. But they said also Benny, Conn, and Livingston also went back to NBC and going, because they said, we're working with George Olsen and Ethel Choate. We were a fabulous package. Find us another sponsor. Bring us back. But George and Ethel would find something else to do. But so
interesting. I love how you didn't plan this, but the first book has you go through it, and at the end it's got the introduction of Mary, so it's got like this
Yeah.
tease at the end of, oh, Mary's going to be on here now. And then this volume, you've got the whole volume plays out, and then at the end you've got the changed relationship with Mary and Jack that is fun to read about. And then it has the first spoof. It ends with the first spoof of a movie show. So you can see how it's changing, and it makes you want, I want the next volume. I want the next volume. So it's playing out really well how they just kind of fell together, and that's wonderful.
So
I can't wait for volume 3.
So volume 3.
And are we looking for like a volume every year or so, or?
I hope so. Yeah, it should be every year, every 9 months, whatever, So as I said, Ben,
however tight you can get it, every 6 months would be great.
I know. So.
Well, whatever you guys can do. I wanted to say though, we talked a number of times in the other interview and in this interview about some of the early sort of times, and we mentioned just how film changed over time, and you were into silent film and everything. I heard the greatest Jack bit that I mean, I'd heard it before, but and I remembered it, but I hadn't listened to it in a long time. It was I think it was the very first time that Jack appeared on Fred's show.
Oh,
and I think you've heard that one. Maybe you haven't. I'm not sure, but it's pre-feud. It's like 1935 or 36. And it's the only appearance I ever know that I've ever heard of where Jack was on a radio show where it was Jack and Mary, but it was Jack and Mary, husband and wife. It wasn't the characters they play. So they were talking about being married, and so were Portland and Fred talking about being married. It's just like this 10-minute bit. But there's one piece in it where he's like, why are you out in California, Jack, or something, or why were you out there? Whatever. Oh, I was filming a movie, and I've got this movie coming out, and I think it even says the title of the movie or something. And then Fred says, oh yeah, I created a movie recently and things, and I don't know if you've seen it, but it's out there or whatever. And Jack says, he says, yeah, my movie's doing pretty well and all that. I didn't get a chance to see yours though, Fred. I didn't get a chance to check out the Nickelodeons or anything, so I couldn't see it. So I thought, what a great slam. And I just thought that was fantastic. And, because I'm sure they weren't even around at that time, but
no.
But it's referring to something that was 10 or 15 years earlier. And it's so perfect that your movie would only get shown on Nickelodeon. I love it. So yeah, there was it's a charming little 10-minute bit. It's another one where I'd love to have those.
I will look for it, because the whole topic of Fred in Portland is so interesting, because her character on his show, she's about 13. And some people found her character quite annoying. But of course, Fred said, if I can't have her on the show, I quit tomorrow. She was kind of his lodestone to keep him, because he worked so hard. He was virtually the only author on his shows.
And I loved her on sometimes, so I thought she was great. I mean, she didn't have the depth of Mary or anything, but
no. She doesn't do that many things, but occasionally he would make a joke about, oh yeah, we're traveling, and what it's going to be like when I tell the hotel manager that you and your 13-year-old character, and we're staying in the same room.
Yes. God. So. Well, the other thing I just thought I'd mention about Fred, since we're talking about him, and this was lucky that Radio Spirits put out a set about the feud a while back, and it had some unreleased episodes and some from the very first feud stuff. So a lot of stuff. It was charming, but they decided, because he was doing hour-long shows, that a lot of it they just cut that section out, and I just wish they would have presented the whole show, or had multiple volumes, or whatever they needed to do. But it's nice to know they're so clear sounding. You're going, okay, I know this whole episode exists in good shape somewhere. But as far as I know, all of Fred's stuff, or most of it, is at Boston Public Library.
And then there's a whole bunch of it at the Library of Congress too. And it may be, given that it costs a lot to publish things, it's possible that the future of us getting to see scripts might be stuff online, just for and then it gets it gets tied up in who has the legal rights to this stuff. And, you know.
Well, and that's kind of where they're at, because they digitized all his shows and things, but they haven't really put them on their site. I'm hoping, because other folks, like the folks that have Orson's shows, have put them all, their whole collection on site, on the line. And I think maybe what saves them from you know, getting sued or anything, or at least makes them comfortable with putting them out there, is they put them out there where you know, there's you can make a choice if the download button works or it doesn't work. And in their case, they made it where you can listen to it, you can stream it, you can listen to it all you want, but you just can't hit download. Now, if you're gonna, you know, you could have it play and record it or whatever you want to do, but you can get them. But it just makes it where you've got to take the effort, and they can say, hey, we tried to make it as much where they can just listen as possible and not have the show.
Indeed, and it gets all complicated about who thinks that there's still money left in this,
which there's not. I mean, there's so piddly amount of money. You're talking, oh, if we release this just right, we can make $1,000 off of these 20 shows. It's like, really?
You know, and yet then you hear about TikTok millionaires and YouTube million. You know, I mean, if we only had
but they're not doing old time radio shows.
No, exactly. If Jack could just be unboxing toys,
yes, exactly. It'd be great. It'd be great. Well, no, what I was going to say though about the Boston Public Library is I visited there once. We were in Boston, and my wife was like, I'm like, you know, I really want to go check out. They got the Fred Allen collection. Blah, blah, blah. You know, and my wife, she's got us down on our itinerary. She goes, you have 45 minutes. I'm like, 45 minutes. Okay, I'll take 45 minutes. So I go up there. And so here's the idiot I am. I'm like, okay, I can't, they haven't given me the script, but they've given me their index that has, you know, what's available, right? So I start writing down and going, I'd love to write down what all they have. And so I write like 3 things and then realize, okay, 45 minutes, this is not going to work. They have too much stuff. Then I get a brilliant idea, one of my brainstorms, that is like, oh, wait a minute, I'll do it in reverse. I will put down what they don't have. So what I did was I went through, and anywhere there was a gap, and they usually would have like a long run, and then they'd have a gap. And anywhere they had a gap or just a missing episode, I'd write down that. So then I had this inverse list of everything they didn't have. And it took me like exactly 45 minutes to get this thing done. I walked away, and I can tell you exactly what they have in their archive, even though I don't have it written down what they have. I just have written down what they don't, but I can figure it out that way. And so it's charming. And it's like, and they have, I would say, from what's circulating to what they probably have twice as much as what's circulating. So there's a lot of Fred Allen shows, and a lot of the early one, you know, the 1940, 1935, 36, I mean, critical areas. What's interesting, one area they're missing is like the entire Warriors are just gone. They don't have from 41 to whatever it is. But luckily those episodes exist a lot in circulation. So between circulation and the episodes they have, they're different enough that you cover a lot of ground. Because they're actually 41, the year that Kenny Baker was on the show as the singer is, I think, 41 to 42 or 41 to 43, something like that. His whole first year is pretty well preserved in nice sound. It's one of their highest parts of the collection that's circulating. So I love that piece that you have his songs, and you have, I mean, you have his songs from like a third of the year on. So 2/3 of the year you have his songs. The beginning third you don't. And some of them are so frustrating. There's one where it's like, okay, now let's go to Kenny, and he's going to sing us I Found My Thrills on Blueberry Hill. And I'm like, I would love to hear Kenny's version of that. And so he goes like, I found my click, and then it's done. And then it's like, no. Because it's not even, if they introduce a song or just skip the whole introduction, it's not as bad. When they introduce the song and give you a taste so you know it was there, and then it's cuts, you're just like, oh, how rude. And every time it gets me, every time, you know, because sometimes I'll be playing a song and you're like, oh, well, I don't really care about this song. But other times it's a song you'd really like to hear. Or it's one that I've heard Dennis do that I'd like to hear Kenny's version of that same song and compare them. But it's like, but anyway, but yeah, so that's the other thing. We got to somehow get someone to get that Fred Allen stuff. Because Jack, I feel like we've done a really
That's
good
true.
job.
Ben would very much, yeah.
Of getting his shows. And then with this, I mean, so many things we've done that allow within, when you get these volumes done, you're going to essentially have every show you could ever listen to at Jack, whether it's in reading form or whether it's with Fred. There's so much missing, and there's so much, and the ultimate person that I think there's more out there on that we can't get to for whatever reason is Bob Hope. Bob Hope, I think we have 100. I think there's 120 episodes in circulation. But as far as I've heard, his archive person that's in charge of, through his estate, which smart archivist, let's release nothing, and I'll just sit on it for the whole time. It's like he said he was quoted somewhere saying they had 700 or 800 episodes of his radio show
Well,
what are they waiting for?
I've got an inside. I've got an inside source. I'll check. A big part of Bob Hope's archives is now at the Library of Congress, and I know someone.
But again, the Library of Congress, you have to pay a fortune to get like one script made for you or something. And can you even listen? I don't think they have a listening way to listen to any of their stuff.
No, they're trying to change their tune. They're trying to make some more things available, and so here's hoping. If it's,
exactly. Please, Library of Congress.
I know it. So
the shows exist so people can study them and listen to them, and there's no money in it. Just put it out there so we can experience it. Shoot, because I just feel like that's one place. I mean, Library of Congress, or whether you send it to Library of Congress or you send it to a college or you send all your stuff to a library somewhere. Generally what they do is they store it all in boxes somewhere and make it really hard for anybody to get to, and where they have to jump through all kinds of hoops.
A lot of it comes down to money. No one can see the value in putting into the labor of doing it, and it costs money to even store things. And then there are some archives that want to keep pesky researchers away from their precious archives, because people steal things. Things go missing, and so but I see hopeful things.
But if any of those places said, we would like to digitize our stuff, we don't have any money to do it, there are fans that would. I would fly if they told me I could go into Fred's and transfer his stuff. I would fly back there. I'd spend an entire summer there, pay them. They wouldn't have to pay me a penny. Even if they said they'd do it, I'd probably give them $5,000 so I could sit there and digitize everything for them. They can put it, I just want to get it out there so people can hear the stuff. And as we're getting people older and older, it's like there are people that would love to hear it are gone. There are more of them being gone every day, and it's just so sad.
We got to get new ones. But indeed, one person, in a whole village can eventually make this stuff happen.
I know. I'm so glad you're in our village. Thank you so much for what you've done and what you continue to do for Jack Benny and his legacy. And I'm so excited that we're going to have all these volumes. And I don't know, I think I'm more thrilled, honestly, that they're coming out. I have something to look forward to. Oh, there's another volume, and I can look through it and enjoy it. If you released all 10 at once, I'd be like, okay, but it'd be embarrassing to riches, and it'd be like, there's a lot to go through. So this is really fun that we can just spend time diving into each one and wait for the next one. And half the enjoyment is, what color is it going to be?
There you go. Lemon coming up soon, or Chevrolet red or something.
I'm waiting for a red. Yeah, I want a red volume. Yeah. Anyway.
Unfortunately, General Tire will have to be like black
volume. That's what I want. The purple one. That'd be nice.
Purple one. There you go.
But anyway, thank you for spending the time with us today. What a wonderful thing you've done, and how much fun it is to spend it. and you highlighted things that they can look for in here. I think that's exactly what I wanted this to be. I wanted it to be, here's exciting things about this volume and why you want to check it out, what areas you want to go to, and here's some exciting stuff about this one. And I think we gave them that. Oh, the other thing I mention it all the time, and I got Kathy turned on to this too, is my versions are the hardback ones.
Oh, yeah,
They
hardback.
cost $10 more. I think it might even be less than $10 more. It might even be like $6 more. They're so worth it for the better. The paper
I had no
inside is
idea that
they're just improved in like every way.
Wow.
And they when you open them, they stay open really nicely. So it's not like trying to close on you or anything.
There you go.
And I just noticed, and you probably don't know this, but they lowered the prices on this volume. It's out there. It wasn't, I paid $43, I think, for it. Now it's right where it should be. It's at $39 for this volume. So,
Yay.
and that's perfect price. And I think this one's $39 too. So that's the other thing. It's the Jack Benny price. How can you not? I'd pay $6 more just for it to be the Jack Benny price. I don't want it for 37 or 36. I want it for 39. That's what I want to pay. So there you go. That's when you're a pathetic fan. And you're like, 39, gotta get it at 39.
I'll give you that.
Anyway, and my kids and my family are like, there was a point where when you were 39, it was all right, but now you're looking bad for 39. Yeah, I'm getting to be 20 years past 39, so it's getting dicey that I'm always saying I'm 39. Though I officially think I had 7 or 8 39th birthday parties. We do them every year, and all of our friends and stuff loved coming to those, and they'd be like, "Oh, what are you doing this year for your 39th birthday party?" And it was charming, but eventually we kind of stopped. Yeah. But anyway, Kathy, thank you for doing the recreations that you do with us. Thank you for just I mean, you
are a tremendous contributor too. I mean, Daryl, between your amazing podcasts and video casts, all the things you introduced me to, that's I do this for a living, and you've shown me so much that I've never seen before. So it's hopefully very much a mutual admiration.
I think it truly is, and it's just neat to know that it's just kind of fun to be one of the key players in kind of the Jack Benny universe. I mean, if you were to list, the 10 or 12 people that are, just out there and known for Benny stuff, we're 2 of them, and it's pretty cool. And then with John on here, he's another one, and Laura has done just amazing stuff for decades and decades. And it's just neat to have a connection with all those people, and to have a way to just the Facebook connection, and where we can talk to each other and send each other messages. It's just charm. What a great, everyone tells, I don't know if they tell you, they tell me all the time, "Oh, you were born in the wrong era. You should have been in 1930. Yeah. I'm like, I don't want to be in 19. If I was 19 or 30 or 40, I'd have to sit here and wait for a week for a Jack Benny show, and then I wouldn't be able to do anything. I just hear it, and then it's gone. And maybe I can read some magazine articles about him or something. But no, today I can listen to anyone I want. I can create a podcast. I can put it out there from my home computer. And if they want, billions of people could get to it if they wanted to. Now, I don't have billions of listeners, but they certainly can find it. It's like, it's just crazy to think you could do that. I remember when kids would do parties, and they'd put up those little, where you'd have a thing saying, "I'm having this party and feel free to come," and they have a little part you can rip off on the bottom to get like 20 people to come or whatever. And now you can go out there and announce whatever you want and have audience of hundreds of thousands or millions that could have access to it. It's just crazy where we live.
Or the best 6 people who could never have gotten together before or know about each other.
Yeah, exactly. We could have all been doing this. We could have all been just as interested as we are now. We couldn't do as much. We couldn't get a hold of each other. We'd all be doing our own little universe. And now we can all connect to each other, and we can have these podcasts, and we can do these things. And, if anything, I'm thankful for COVID for I don't know if I would have ever figured out how to do this video stuff and everything, but that's one of the one of the few positives that's come out of this COVID experience. But because now we've been doing it for what, over a year, maybe a year and a half. We've been doing stuff. Yeah, it's great. It's been a fun year. It's been fantastic. So anyway, everybody enjoy this, and I hope you enjoy my podcast and enjoy Kathy's books. Boy, what a great thing. And if this ever gets aired on one of Laura's Jack Benny tribute things, I hope you're enjoying all of that and experience all the other videos, and I hope you enjoy our recreations of the different Jack shows and stuff. It's fun. Everything we do is
we've got a big thing growing on her Forever 39 site, because that's where I'm going to put up all the pictures I took of Barbara Thinnell's scrapbooks, and that's another like 26 or 3,000 pages of amazing printed stuff that you can't find anywhere else. So
well, and I'll throw out one more little tidbit, and I'll cut this out if you want me to or whatever, but I know that Kathy's got something on her back burners on another Jack Benny sort of project. Is there anything you can share yet about that, or is it just a teaser that it's just something that's there? Maybe
I can't say anything public yet, but it's.
But just know there's some exciting Jack Benny stuff coming up, and besides her current series, and I'm excited about it. And sometimes I get a little insider tidbit or whatever, and I'm just like so excited. So all you Benny fans, lots to look forward to in this upcoming year. So see everybody later. Thank you so much.
All right.
Bye,
Thank
Kathy.
you so much, Daryl.